The full moon is also when we tend to be the most creative, the most expressive. This is a wonderful time to be in the community, to be really bold, to be really communicative. And this brings out this really bold, bright part of ourselves. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the new moon, this is when the sky is black, the moon is actually shadowed. We feel the same exact way. So this would be when we feel the call to be really still, to be really quiet.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Welcome back to the show. We are continuing our conversation, all things feminine and menstruation, with Cassandra Wilder. She's a naturopathic doctor, yoga instructor, and creator of the GoddessCeremony, a global sisterhood that teaches women how to live empowered, authentic lives. And she is passionate about women's health and wellness. And today we're going to go deeper with her. In the last episode, we talked a lot about how you can reclaim your period as a sacred experience. And today we're going to talk about how you can actually begin to align your cycle with the moon and what the natural hormonal shifts are that women experience each month in unison with the lunar phases. So she's going to tell us about what's going on in our bodies during the new waxing, waning, and full moon. And Cassandra's also going to provide dietary guidelines for us and advice for those of us who are looking to regulate your cycle, or maybe you actually want to sync your cycle with the moon. Now, if you're looking to get pregnant, or maybe you're going through menopause, we're going to talk about this as well. So this is really a comprehensive women's issues and hormone balancing episode. I'm really excited to share it. Before I do, I just want to remind you, support the show. Take a moment, leave that review on iTunes if you haven't done it already. It really does make a difference. It helps get the show in front of more people looking to transform their life through yoga and meditation. And you can always screenshot your review. Yes, I'm still doing this. You can screenshot your review and email it to my team, info@brettlarkin.com, and we'll respond with a really beautiful PDF booklet of my favorite affirmations and journaling prompts, just as a little thank you gift for leaving a review. And then the second way you can support the show is by purchasing something on SavannahSpirit.com. And I mentioned this last time, but we now have a new uplifted gift box. Savannah and I teamed up, and I kind of picked out my favorite items that they have on SavannahSpirit.com and put it into this really beautiful gift box. It has the crystal cleansing smudge set that Savannah is so famous for. It has a baby pocket Ganesh, a beautiful anklet, a beautiful bracelet, lavender incense, and Himalayan sea salts that I love to take a bath in. And usually this gift box is $120, but right now, as a special, it's $59. And if you are a new customer to Savannah Spirit, you can use that coupon code TAKE25 for $25 off, which takes the box down to a ridiculously low price. And it's a really great deal on all these gorgeous items. So take advantage of that. Go to SavannahSpirit.com. There aren't that many boxes. I know we only did a limited order. So go over there and click the search button when you get to Savannah Spirit's website. Just start typing in uplifted and you'll see the box come up right away, and you can get this really, really amazing deal. All right, let's jump into today's episode with Cassandra. Cassandra, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Listeners, if you didn't catch Cassandra and I's earlier episode, it's a really great foundation to what we're going to dive deeper in today, because today we're really going to talk about menstruation and the lunar cycles and how we can get more in tune with our natural rhythms. So, Cassandra, we left off last time where you were talking a little bit about how women used to come together, kind of sacred circle or red tent, and they used to just not work and take it easy and all be in community during the time of their cycle because they were all menstruating together, usually with their menses beginning on the new moon. Is that right?
Yes, with the new moon.
With the new moon. So I get asked this question in my community all the time, and I'm sure you do too, but women are really concerned. They're like, I'm not menstruating with the new moon. My menstruation and the lunar cycle, you know, where in the hemisphere that I live, are just not connected. And does that mean something's wrong? What is your answer to that?
It's a really, really good and valid question. Nothing is wrong with not menstruating with the new moon time. I do have some suggestions for women that want to regulate their cycle with the new moon, but that's that's totally a personal choice. Many women menstruate with the full moon as well as other phases throughout the month. So it's more so a personal preference.
Okay, so what you would say as a regular healthy cycle from your, naturopath perspective would just be a cycle that's regular, right? For me as a woman, it doesn't matter if it's lined up to any particular moon phase, or if you're really trying to optimize my health or help me get pregnant or help me work through, some sort of hormonal imbalance, is kind of syncing it up with the new moon or a particular moon phase something that you're looking to do?
I don't usually go into the session with the client with that specific intention, but typically the more we balance the hormones, the more the cycle in general will regulate. And it is fairly common for it to naturally meander in alignment with either the full moon or the new moon specifically. So the body is so fascinating and so incredibly wise.
So why would someone's cycle regulate with the new moon, and why would someone else's cycle maybe regulate with the full moon? Is there a rhyme or reason there? Or if there's not, maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about each of these lunar cycles and how they particularly affect women.
Yes, I think science is still still completely in the dark about why some women's cycles sync with certain moon phases. I've heard more spiritual sides to why, maybe if we're in a more creative phase of life, we'd sync with the full moon. If we're in more of an introspective time, we might sync with the new moon, but not all that necessarily resonates with me. I think there's far more to it, but science is still in awe of the female body. Our bodies are so incredibly wise. So in terms of the actual moon phases, so there are 4 main phases. We've got the new moon and the full moon, as well as the waxing and the waning moon phases. And in all 4 of these phases, women go through distinct hormonal shifts, as well as different energetic, emotional, physical shifts as well, whether we're menstruating or ovulating or somewhere in between all of that. There's huge shifts that go on. And I think all of us have probably had experiences in life where maybe we have a big event coming up and we're so excited for it. And yet on the actual day of the event, we're so tired or we feel so introverted and we don't want to go anymore. And we think, what's wrong with me? And of course, on the opposite end of that, sometimes we feel so social and fertile and sensual, and we're not really in a container where that's welcomed. And again, we tend to feel shame. And so when we understand the moon phases, we have far more compassion for ourselves because there are times of the month when you don't want to be around anyone, when you don't want to have to be at a big social event. And when we're aware of that, then we can honor that.
So keeping in mind, of course, that every woman is unique and different, can you walk us through what you see as sort of the main phases? Like maybe it's easiest to just use the example of a woman who's menstruating on the full moon. I'd love for you to kind of guide us through what this looks like. Like what's the sensual outgoing period, and then what's sort of that more introverted period, and so on.
Yes. Great question. So we'll look at the full moon. When we have a full moon outside, most women are aware of it. I think we naturally all have a deep connection to the moon, and especially the full moon is so beautiful and brilliant. We can see it. We feel that connection. Just as the moon is in her full expansive state, as are we. The full moon time tends to be when women feel the most social. Traditionally, if we were menstruating, say, with the new moon, we'd also be ovulating then with the full moon. So there's the joke that more babies are made on a full moon than any other time. More babies are birthed on a full moon than any other time. It's just a very sensual, creative time. The full moon is also when we tend to be the most creative, the most expressive. This is a wonderful time to be in the community, to be really bold, to be really communicative. And this brings out this really bold, bright part of ourselves. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the new moon, this is when the sky is black, the moon is actually shadowed. We feel the same exact way. And especially if this was when we were menstruating, this would be doubled, if not tripled. So this would be when we feel the call to be really still, to be really quiet. It's very common to feel more introverted during this time of the month, and our energy levels are also lower. So this would be a terrible time to have a wedding or some big event going on, because it's our natural desire to want to cozy in and be still. This would be a wonderful time to offer self-care to ourselves, to meditate, to do some restorative yoga, to really be intentional with these practices.
What about waxing and waning?
Yes. So if we say we start at the new moon, the waxing moon phase is the phase between new moon and full moon. So the energy is starting to rise. With the waxing moon phase, we begin to feel like we can come out of that cavern of the new moon time. This is a really, really wonderful time to set new intentions. So many women feel that they can, in a way, set up their entire life to be in unison with the moon phases. New moon time would be that releasing, rebalancing. As they move into the waxing time, they start to set new goals. They begin to feel a little more energized. And then as they come into that full moon, it's full on work mode. It's not uncommon for women to feel that they have so much energy that they could work a 16-hour day. They just feel totally in sync and totally in alignment. And then after the peak of the full moon, our hormones begin to shift as we move back down towards our menstrual time. So the waning moon time is a really interesting in-between time. This can be when we feel a little more PMS maybe, but it's a time when we tend to be the most intuitive and have the deepest desire to look within, to offer ourselves those introspective practices.
I love it. So ideally, one might track their cycle and try to design best they could, maybe a work trip or, things that we ought to have control over, honestly, around some of these phases. And is that what you do and what you recommend for your clients?
I do. And I think every woman takes this to a different extent. I have met women who literally plan their entire lives around the moon phases. So with the full moon, they do work 16-hour days. And with the new moon, they take 3 days off. If that works for you, that's amazing. But I think a lot of us are going to need to do that in a smaller level. And so if that means with the new moon time, you create an hour where you can take a nap or you can take a bath, and that is the extent of what you can do, that is amazing. And so you need to just find more so what's sustainable and what works for you. I don't think there's any one way to do this, but it is really valuable when you do honor your body and you do honor the moon phases, because it allows you to have more compassion for yourself. So if you were like picking your wedding date, for example, I probably wouldn't pick a new moon because I want to feel my brightest and my most empowered and have the most energy. But of course, sometimes you can't change. You can't be like, sorry, sister, you can't get married on the full moon otherwise, or on the new moon, because otherwise I can't come. My energy levels will be totally off. Right? It doesn't work that way. So you just have to do the best that you can.
What advice do you have for women who are looking to regulate their cycle? I know in the last episode, we talked a little bit about, how to alleviate common symptoms that are associated with menstruation, right? Like bloating or cramping or things like that. But I know so many listeners are probably really interested in regulating their cycle, either just regulating it kind of themselves just to get regular. And I'm sure many are perhaps regular and want to take that next step of trying to sync it up with the lunar phases as you described. I'm imagining diet plays into this and a bunch of other things. So can you guide us through that?
Yes. One of the greatest things you can do to start to regulate your cycle, especially if it's very irregular or if you've actually been diagnosed with amenorrhea, where you actually have a cessation of menstruation, would be to make sure you're getting enough iron in your diet. Probably 90% of the women I work with come to me and are severely iron deficient, if not borderline anemic. It should be a severe iron deficiency. So there's lots of ways where you can get more iron. For some people, animal proteins are really ideal, especially people that are blood type O's. They tend to do best with red meat. But if that's not your thing, or if you just don't feel good eating meat, red raspberry leaf tea or nettle tea need to be your new BFFs. Those are bursting with iron, and those will help regulate your cycle. If your cycle is irregular, it's almost always in some way correlated back to an iron deficiency. So that's really, really important.
Wow, that's so interesting. Any other juicy tips for folks who are trying to regulate or trying to sync up with the moon?
Yes. So the biggest tip I have for women that want to actually sync up with the moon, specifically the new moon, and again, that's just a personal preference if you want to do that. There's nothing wrong with menstruating at any other time. The biggest thing with this is sleeping in complete darkness. And it sounds strange, or it sounds like even too simple, but so many of us are infiltrated with light all the time. And maybe you'll be more aware of this tonight when you go to bed. Look around and you'll notice how bright it is, whether it's from street lamps outside, your alarm clock, the little light on your TV on the wall. There's so much light. And so our pineal gland, this, third eye between our eyebrows, is this little light receptor, and it never gets a chance to reset. And when this gland never has the chance to reset, our hormones often get out of sync. So there's a lot of correlation here, but when I have women sleep in total darkness for 3 months, and this means total darkness, no eye mask or anything. You need to literally be in a dark cave when you sleep, which you should be anyway, but most of us don't. Their cycle will completely regulate to the new moon time.
Wow. And why is the eye mask not enough? Because right away when you were talking about this, I was like, okay, perfect. I have the eye mask going on. I'm good. But you're saying that you actually, you don't want that. You want the whole room dark. Why?
Yes. Unfortunately, the body is very tricky to deceive. And so we have small light receptors all over the body. And so I do have women say, I'm going to wear an eye mask and I'm going to totally stay under the covers all night. But if you extend your arm out, or if your foot sticks out, even that can throw the whole thing off. So we have to remember that traditionally, thousands of years ago, when people were sleeping, they were out in tents or even maybe just right underneath the stars. So when it was totally black outside, the body could read, because of the lack of light, that it was a new moon time. And when there was light, that indicated to the body it's a full moon time. But we don't have that anymore. It's in essence always a full moon to our body, because we never get that break. And therefore our hormones kind of throw their hands in the air and say, I have no clue what moon phase it is or what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow, so interesting. All right, anything else we should know?
Oh, those are the two big ones. Yeah, I think just those two shifts for most women will make a huge night and day difference. Pun slightly intended.
for new moon thinking. But since we have you here and I really want to make this applicable and helpful to all women, I'm curious just really quickly kind of what your advice is for women who are trying to get pregnant, and then also what your advice is for women who are going through menopause or perimenopause.
Great questions. There's so much to the fertility question. That's one of my specialties that I work with women on, and it's such a personal journey. But if I were to throw out a couple really general things that could be really helpful in terms of conception, the iron thing is huge. We have to remember the body is so wise. And so if your body doesn't feel like it can safely maintain a pregnancy, it will avoid getting pregnant, because it doesn't want to, of course, not be able to carry the baby full term. And iron is really, really key for that. So I would be drinking red raspberry leaf tea every day, maybe a couple cups a day. Another thing is to make sure you're sleeping a regular and consistent schedule. And so, for example, I've seen women who worked graveyards sometimes, they were nurses. So 3 nights a week, they'd be up all night, and the rest of the week they'd sleep, more of a normal cycle. And just by getting them off the graveyards and getting them on a consistent sleep schedule, they were able to conceive. And that was pretty miraculous. And their medical physicians, of course, were very shocked and were like, well, that couldn't be the reason why. But just that is enough to help the hormones rebalance. So getting that consistent sleep schedule in is so key. And then lastly, to make sure that you are eating organic is, I don't think I can accurately describe how important that is. But if you're trying to get pregnant, that needs to be one of the first things you do, is make the complete switch to organic, so that you are not ingesting anything that could be linking your body to infertility.
Great tips. Okay, let's go to the other end of the spectrum real quick. Perimenopause, menopause, women who are dealing with all the symptoms that go with that. What's your quick advice for them?
Yes. So a couple suggestions there. There are, again, some really amazing herbs that help to support the body through all of this. We have to remember that at one point we didn't so much have doctors, but rather we had herbalists, we had midwives. And so these, generally, they were women. They would be working with things from the earth, things that people have been using for thousands of years. So black and blue cohosh are two of the best herbs in the world as far as addressing menopause, hot flashes, night sweats, anything like that. They're really incredible. So I'd recommend working with a naturopath or an herbalist to make sure one of those would be right for you. This kind of opens up a whole can of worms, but there is so much research coming out right now in terms of vaginal steaming being really, really impactful for menopause. We're seeing women change their symptoms completely, literally overnight, just from addressing it with vaginal steaming. So,
and I'm going to have to ask you, I'm sorry, what is that? I'm sorry, we're going there. What is this?
I know. I was like, this is going to open up a whole new thing. Vaginal steaming is a very ancient practice where you, in essence, make a big pot of hot water with certain herbs, and then you sit over it for 15 minutes or so, and the steam rises up into your body. And so it's a very gentle approach. We're not actually putting any herbs up inside of us or anything like that. It's simply the steam. But there's a huge amount of research coming out on it right now showing that it's very effective for many common female complaints, among them menopause.
That's great. That's sort of what I was envisioning, but I just wanted to be sure. Anything else you want to share about menopause? Because I mean, we all know, like our moms or, whether you're going through it or a listener, we all know someone who's going through this. So anything else you want to share on that?
Another thing that could be really valuable is to support the thyroid. Often when we're going through menopause, the thyroid is, we could say, struggling. And so addressing that by eating more kelp or even ingesting more iodine-rich foods or using an iodine supplement itself would be really helpful, because when we have a balanced thyroid, the rest of our hormones are far more likely to be balanced as well.
And I'm really glad you brought up the thyroid, because I had jotted down a question I had meant to ask you earlier. Do we see changes in, I know you were talking about the pineal, but in the pineal or the pituitary or the thyroid, like in terms of even just the size of these organs when menstruation is happening compared to not happening?
It's a wonderful question. I have not seen any studies about that specifically, but I would not be surprised if especially the pineal and pituitary gland have fairly significant shifts.
Right. Yeah. Like in my prenatal course, I teach, and this was handed down to me from my teachers, and there's studies on it as well, I'm pretty sure, but that the pituitary actually does enlarge during pregnancy. And I think it enlarges very subtly, perhaps during ovulation as well, but we'll have to look that up. Or listeners, you can type in and research, but it's pretty fascinating. I know, it really is. Cassandra, this has been so great. I'm wondering, is there any just last words of wisdom that you want to share with people in terms of menstruation, the moon? I'm also just sort of curious what your personal practice looks like around this. I always like to ask guests sort of what their practice looks like in terms of yoga and meditation, and I'm pretty sure yours is pretty heavily synced up with the lunar cycles, although correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm also a little bit curious about like what your bedroom looks like. I'm like, do you have your iPhone like plugged in another room? Like tell us a little bit about behind the scenes here before we let you go.
Okay. Yes, my life is pretty heavily in sync with the moon phases. My bedroom has blackout blinds, and so that was a really inexpensive way to do that. I turn off, like my salt lamps. I do have my phone in my room, but it's always on airplane mode. I'll turn off my Wi-Fi at night. So I do try to make it a really nourishing space so that my body has the opportunity to heal and restore while I sleep. In terms of like my yoga practice, my meditation practice, it's very, very, energetic or vibrant, especially around the full moon time. Today and tomorrow are the new moon. And so it's very likely that I will be skipping yoga in my personal practice for the next few days, because if I don't feel energized or if I don't feel any sort of intuitive desire to even go there, then I'll skip it. And I'll do that with a sense of self-compassion. So my biggest tip to anyone listening is to honor your body in the natural ebb and flow that it goes through, because we are not constant. We're not always the same. Every month you are shifting in a million different ways. And so rather than judging yourself for the days you feel tired, the days you have a higher libido, the days you feel more creative, see it as a beautiful expression of your connection to your body and your connection to the natural elements.
I love that. I know, because we're so quick to beat ourselves up when we don't like A+ on a certain day. And I think the older I've gotten, I think I've been doing a better job at just sort of embracing the days where it's like explosive energy and embracing the days where I feel like I need to relax. And if it's helpful for listeners, a big thing that helped me do this was just trusting. I think a lot of us sometimes don't trust ourselves. So we think, oh, well, if I take it easy for a couple days, that means I suck, or it means like I'm never going to work again, or it means, like you have to trust that like the rejuvenation is on the other side of you taking time. Does that make sense, Cassandra? Am I crazy? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like you're not going to end up watching Netflix for 20 days. Like, trust yourself enough, you know? Like, you can you indulge, and then you're going to feel like you want to take action again. And when I started really trusting that would be the case, I found it a lot easier to not beat myself up and take it easy when I felt like taking it easy. And I just wanted to slip that nugget in there. Cassandra, tell everyone before we let you go how they can work with you, how they can connect with you, and kind of what are these, I think they're called goddess retreats that you lead. I want to make sure people know what those are in case they want to go deeper with you.
Yes, you can visit GoddessCeremony.com, and that's where you can book a private one-on-one session with me if you specifically want to address some health imbalances. But then I also lead sacred goddess retreats all over the country as well as worldwide, and these are sacred places for women to gather together to bring awareness to some of these key aspects of womanhood and femininity that virtually none of us learned. So we do talk about how we cycle with the moon phases, menstruation, the art of receiving, manifestation, all of that goodness wrapped up into a sacred retreat experience.
Do you ever have mothers and daughters or like young women coming to this? Like, I feel like if I had a daughter and she was like 12 or 13 or whatever, I'd like so want her to take her on something like this.
Yes, we've had some pretty young women. I think the youngest was 14. And so we don't have a set age limit because some 14-year-olds are more mature than 18-year-olds, you know? It's very dependent.
Well, it just must be so amazing for them to have such an incredible culture and community around this just when they're starting, because I know for so many of us, that was not our experience. So I think the work you're doing is so important. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And Savannah listeners, let me know what you thought of our guest today. I love getting feedback from you. Ping me over on Instagram. You can send me a DM at Larkin Yoga TV is how you can find me on Instagram. And of course, I want you to follow and support Savannah Spirit while you're on there at Savannah Spirit. And all of Cassandra's links and everything she talked about, I'm going to link up right below this episode in the show notes. So make sure to check that out as well. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to connect with you in the next episode. From my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode. And thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.